Hello, welcome everybody to LatinX and Animation, a Masterclass. This is our second annual LatinX and Animation, a Masterclass taking place at LALIFF Connect 2020, which this year transformed into a virtual festival. Next year, we'll be back hopefully in person at Chinese theaters. I want to take the opportunity to thank LALIFF and the team, Alexis de la Rocha, Rafael Agustin, and the crew for programming this and making this month of May and an exciting time for Latino films, shorts, music, and panels. And luckily, we have an opportunity to bring an exciting guest speakers and moderator to talk about animation. And I don't want to take too much time because I wanted them to discuss. But again, thank you to everyone for taking the time and the participating studios as well. If you don't know who LatinX Animation is, go to latinxandanimation.org, and that way you can learn about the work that we're doing to promote and empower diversity in animation and helping people of color and minorities to break into the industry and have their voices heard. I'm going to start letting in our moderator, Carlos Aguilar. Hello, Carlos. Welcome
Hi, Brian.
to LatinX Animation. Again, I want to thank you for taking the time to join us, and I'm excited for you to lead this discussion with some amazing, talented professionals in the animation industry. I'm going to start letting them in one by one, and then they can talk about themselves. But first, I want you to introduce yourselves and let our audience know who you are.
Sure. Thank you for having me. Really excited that the LALIFF in this virtual version this year, it's hosting a masterclass dedicated to animation, which is a medium that I'm fascinated by and that I love. So I'm excited. I'm a film critic and writer for multiple publications in like the LA Times, Indiewire, Cartoon Brew, specifically about animation. And it's really a passion of mine. So I'm excited to learn more about the creative process of these four grades.
Awesome, thank you. I'm gonna let in our first guest speaker, Andrea Fernandez from Netflix Animation. Hello, Andrea. Welcome back to LatinX and Animation, a Masterclass.
Hey.
Again, thank you for taking the time to join us today. And I know we're excited to hear from you and your background and the work that you're doing at Netflix Animation. I'm gonna go ahead and let in our next speaker, Guillermo Martinez. Hi, Guillermo. Welcome to LatinX and Animation, a Masterclass. Yeah, we're excited to have you. Guillermo Martinez is the head of story of Connected at Sony Pictures Animation. I'll let Carlos and everyone else lead the discussion and talk about yourself later. I'm going to welcome our next guest as well, letting in Yvette Marino. Hello, Yvette. Welcome.
Hello. Hello.
Thank you for joining us. Yvette Marino is a co-producer at Walt Disney Animation Studios and has very lengthy history working at the studio and on many of your favorite films that you might have watched. Again, thank you for joining us. I'll let Carlos lead the discussion and let you talk about yourself, but I'm gonna let in our next guest, and then I'm gonna hop off and let Carlos take it from here. All right, Miguel, welcome.
What's going on?
Welcome to LatinX Animation, a Masterclass. Miguel is the creative producer of the Casa Grandes at Nickelodeon Animation. Again, thank you for joining us and taking the time. I'm going to let Carlos Aguilar take the discussion from here and let everybody introduce themselves and talk about their background. I'm going to turn off my video and audio, but I will be managing the camera, you can say. So yeah, if there's any issues, feel free to just say my name and I'm going to hop on like a wizard.
Brian.
Sounds great. Thanks all of you for being here. I'm excited to learn more about all your projects and your work. And thank you for, thank you everyone that's watching out there that, has interest in this medium and animation. So many great things happen in animation, even in the time of a pandemic like this. So I wanted to start by asking each one of you if you could give us sort of like the elevator pitch version of your origin story into this medium, and did you always want to be an animator or work in animation, or what was the thing that led you into this path? You want to start, Andrea, since I have you here first?
Oh, okay, in order. I like it. I I actually didn't know I wanted to be in animation. I think as a kid, I just drew a lot and I made videos pretty early on. Like I would make Selena music videos at home and make all my cousins and brother and sister act in it. So it was just kind of this thing that I knew that I liked. Like I liked making movies and I liked drawing, but I didn't know like really too much about animation other than that I loved Disney movies. And my parents were actually really freaked out about me being an artist. And when I showed any kind of inclination towards becoming an artist, they were just kind of like, yeah, maybe a lawyer instead. So I kind of veered away from that pretty much through, you know, my teenage years. I didn't draw anything, but I kind of sneaked in a lot of film classes because they didn't know too much about that. So I became a little bit of a film aficionado at like as a teenager, and I wanted to do everything to get into film school. And it was kind of a stark reality when I realized that going to film school was going to be very expensive, and the path towards making that monetized for like a first generation immigrant like myself and the family I came from was kind of a harsh reality. And I just, at that moment, I had, you know, I lived in Canada, in Mississauga, Ontario, and they're really close to a very well-known animation school. And somebody just kind of approached me about it and talked to me about it. And I was like, well, that, you know, that could be a thing. I looked into their pamphlets and I was like, well, I like drawing and I like film. And it seems like I could come out of this with some actual like tangible skills that I could probably get a job after I'm done college. So that kind of opened up the whole animation world for me. And so it was 4 years at, you know, animation college in Oakville, Ontario, where there's really nothing to do but draw and paint and animate. So all those years that I didn't draw a single thing, I had to like pick it up real quick within the 4 years I was in college. And from there, I got out during the recession, which was also a super crappy situation to be in. But even then, you know, I was able to land a job as a character designer at a studio in Toronto. And I had done an internship here in Los Angeles the summer previous to my graduating. So within that year, I had a couple of gigs and I got an offer from a studio in Los Angeles, and I came out. I was like, well, you know, this is what I want to do. This is what I'm going to pursue. And I, you know, ended up moving myself here for the past, and I've been here now for like 10 years working at little studios. And then, you know, you kind of keep growing. Then I got into like bigger studios, kind of did illustration, video game stuff, toys. And then, you know, animation got really, well, I feel like the industry really popped within the last 5 years, and I was able to kind of catapult into better gigs, better positions, better studios, and that's kind of it. Sorry, I tried to make it quick, but it's kind of long.
No, it's great. Yeah. Miguel, did you want to give us your origin story?
Yeah, sure. Let's see. I grew up in East LA, Boyle Heights, and I was always surrounded by art, just from like, you know, just the colorful stuff that was going on in my house, from the food that my mom was making, all the salsa, the chiles. So I always saw that as like the color that popped, to my cousins, to learning how to do tattoos on all the cholos in the neighborhood. I always knew I wanted to be in animation, just from watching cartoons growing up. I was one of those kids that was stuck. And I had no choice, because growing up in a rough neighborhood, it was always, you got to stay inside. So that's what I did for a lot of my days and weeks and summers, and comic books and reading and just watching cartoons. Yeah, I kind of always was a Nick kid growing up. But one of the most impactful things was Thanksgiving. I saw the Snoopy Thanksgiving short, or the movie, and I saw Bill Melendez's name. And I was like, whoa, that's a Latino guy in a cartoon. So that's kind of what like opened up the doors for me. And I was like, I could do that. I must have been like 7 years old. So just going from there, going to college, I always knew I always wanted to be an artist. And it didn't matter if it was in comic books or video games, but just going to college, I think I just fell in love with everything that had to do with animation. Because without college, I had no idea how to, find out about this stuff. But now I think nowadays kids have everything in their fingertips. I see kids post animation drawings way better than I could ever do now, and they're like 17 or 16, and it's amazing. I can't wait to be their boss and fire them one day. No, I'm just kidding. I'm joking. It's so awesome just seeing that, and I can't wait to be involved with all these artists one day, maybe next week, once we hire them on our show, or when we all have our own show and or movie or whatever. It'll be awesome to just pick everyone out from out there that kind of grew up like us.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's it, right?
Yvette, you've been around the block of this industry for a little longer than some of these folks. So you want to tell us your origin story? How did you get into animation back then?
Yeah, I definitely have been around for a little bit. I've been at Disney for, I think, over 23 years now, which is probably older than some of you watching this, so yay. So I didn't study animation. I actually, when I graduated school, from college, I was going to go into social work, and I did that for a couple of years and decided that, I just wasn't passionate about it, and I didn't want to, that's not what I wanted to do. And so I ended up temping around, and I got, temped at different studios and different places, and I got lucky and got a long-term temp job at Disney Animation. And, from there I got hired on, and I worked in technology. So my story is a little different than a lot of my friends in production, where I didn't start off as a PA. I worked in technology for a while and doing their administrative stuff. And over time, I had met one of the producers at the studio, and he's like, I think you'd be really good in production. You may want to, I need somebody to work in my editing department. And, are you interested? And so I jumped in, and within 6 months, I was like, oh, these are my people. Why haven't I done this my entire career? So I was about 10 years into my career at Disney when I made that jump. So I, worked in production, and then, really fell in love with animation and fell in love with, the process and working with the artists. And so I worked different roles, and then eventually became, got into my role now as a co-producer.
Wow. Guillermo, I think you're the last one to tell us your origin and story.
All right, so I'll try to be really fast with this one. Okay, so I was born in Puerto Rico a long time ago, and I've always been obsessed with animation. Like I was obsessed with like Disney animation. Like I just remember going to like the Art of Animation and at the Disney parks in Orlando, and being like, oh, so you can do these things. And from that moment on, I was like, I want to do this, which was fun for my dad, who was like, you're going to be a doctor. I'm like, I'm going to be an animator. And he's like, what is that? What are you talking about? So it was a constant battle between me and him until eventually I decided, like, you know what, I'm just going to go do art. But at the time when I got into college, like animation there wasn't an industry in Puerto Rico for animation. So I just had to like get like jobs in like graphic design or like doing comic strips or anything that was a sort of that slightly resemble animation. I wanted to do it, and so I just did it for a while until I got accepted at the Academy of Art in San Francisco, which was this animation school, and I left the island, and I was focused. I'm like, I'm gonna do 3D animation because this is what I want to do. This is what I love. I love 3D animation. Let's do it. I did 3D animation and hated it because I couldn't. I was like, wait, what's going on? How do you connect these things? And the way of animating 3D sometimes is really cold. And I'm like, all right, I'm gonna do 2D animation. And then I did 2D animation, and then someone told me, oh, we don't do 2D animation anymore. And I'm like, wait, what? Okay, cool. And then I had a mentor who taught me about storyboarding, and then from that moment on, I discovered that storyboarding was like this thing that kind of combined everything: combined animation, combined acting, combined staging, combined all. And I was like super obsessed with it. So I just focused on doing storyboarding for a while and applied to a bunch of places, but didn't get into a lot of places. So while in San Francisco, I just worked on like a social media gaming company, and it was like it was a fun time. And then eventually, like, sent me an email saying, "Hey, we love your resume and portfolio," and I'm like, "Wait, how do you get my portfolio and resume? How do you do that?" And so I went there for a couple of years, and I helped out a little bit on Clue 1 to 2 Strings, and then after that, I went to work on Missing Link. But then after that, I got a job at Cartoon Network, and I worked there for like 4 seasons on the show called We Bare Bears, and I wrote and storyboarded there, and it was just like it was a pretty exciting time. And then, but I was also flying back and forth from Portland to LA until eventually Sony contacted me and said like, "Hey, we're doing this movie called Connected," in which I was like, "Yeah." And then the director pitched it to me, and I was like, "Oh, I want to work on this movie 100%." And so I worked on the movie for like almost like 4 years now. I mean, from the very beginning. And yeah, and then and in the process, they made me the head of story of the movie, and yeah, it's been kind of a fun experience. And the fastest way I've ever told this story. So I probably missed a lot of things, but it's totally fine.
Fast at all.
Yeah.
These might be more obvious for some of your projects than others, but how do you feel that your identity as a Latino artist influences your work, if at all? And do you feel like in the work that you're doing currently, you're able to sort of bring that side of your personality, of your background into the work? Whoever wants to start.
I can start. I think it's funny. I've been thinking about that a lot. Like, I think we Latinos have like a particular sensibility and humor, and there's an energy that I think is missing from a lot of like animation, or was missing from a lot of animation for a long time. And I think, I don't know what it is. I think it's we have a more, what a horrible way to answer the question. But yeah, but I think we have we're more intense, we're more passionate. I think that's the word I'm looking for. It took me a while to get it out, but I think
You got it.
we're more passionate about everything that we do. Like we have passion in cooking, we have passion in painting, we have passion in the way we live, and so that immediately starts like oozing into our work. And I know people who sometimes might look at my stuff and be like, "Wow, there's something about it. I don't know what it is." I'm like, I think it's just like I try to get that passion as much as possible in everything that I do. So, yeah, that's I think my answer.
Miguel, I feel like it's a little more evident in the Casa Grandes how this has influenced. You want to tell us about getting it out there in the Casa Grandes?
Oh yeah, it's basically I just opened up my heart and brain and everyone on the crew. That's we have a unique perspective of growing up in the U.S. that we get to share that in the cartoon, and also at the same time we get to show how the similarities we have with everybody, and yet we have like many differences too. But the stuff that we make in the show about family that's what connects us. And I think doing that with I'm a first generation Mexican American, having that influence and passion. And one thing my dad always said, "Échale ganas for everything you do." And it's something I've always done for every show I ever worked on. I think I worked with them back in like 10 years ago on a little small studio. And even then, back then, I was just trying to sneak in like whatever little Latino thing I could fit in. Like if it was like an Aztec hairpiece or some just different colors I would throw in there. And every I think it's just my identity. It's just how my gears work in my head. And every time I see something, I was like, "Hey, what if we did this? Or what if we made that character Latino? Or what if we made this?" So I kind of always try to see the world the way a real big city would be. And, a lot of instead of being just peppered in background for characters on shows, I kind of just want to bring that up and, just make it more, just a connected tissue of just having just so much color out there on the screen. is something that I've always influenced myself to keep working on.
Andrea, anything you wanna add from your perspective?
Sure. Yeah, I actually, yeah, I agree with a lot with like what you guys are kind of putting out there so far. I mean, I do think Latinos bring like a certain level of passion and kind of color to the stories they tell, and I'm definitely always pushing my agenda, whether people want to hear it or not. So, you know, some projects lend themselves a little bit better to kind of getting those influences in there than others. But I feel like for me personally, you know, I've yet to work on a really kind of culturally specific property or show. That's definitely one of the goals for me. I'm really excited about doing that one day on my own time. And, you know, I work on my own stories, and I try to pitch and have for a long time, like working on my own kind of stories and possible like properties that contain a lot of Latin American influence. We'll see what the future holds, but in the meantime, the way I try to kind of, you know, do it on a project like Cuphead, for example, is really culturally, like within the crew, like what, you know, I feel like I try to bring a lot of my culture into it, as in like the way I build that crew. There's a lot of diversity in our crew. There's Latinos, there's Asian people, there's, you know, kind of like a big array. It's, you know, actually very female heavy for a design crew. Like I just try to bring in that kind of diversity on that level to the project. And then in terms of like culturally, I think I create a really open space. I think Latinos are really comfortable with discussing matters that are not, you know, also always easy to discuss. We're a very open kind of group of people. And I think I try to bring that into the culture of the crew I'm kind of cultivating and creating, that, you know, they can come to me and ask me questions, or we can push the envelope, or we can talk about difficult things. And I think that's, you know, not exactly putting it on screen, but I'm infusing it into the day-to-day of my work environment.
And Ibet, for you, sort of like in the production side, in the behind the scenes, has that, you know, that part of you being influential, or, you know, in any way in your career?
Well, yeah, I think, you know, obviously I think with all of us, you know, being Latina or Latinx is who I am, and that's what I bring to work every day. And I've been fortunate, you know, I'm surrounded in a place that accepts that. And it hasn't always been that way, you know, in different places that I've worked, but, you know, I'm able just to kind of bring, you know, my experience and how I grew up.
I think, you know, Andrea was mentioning this earlier, but generally I feel like for, you know, Latinos in the US, you know, who are, you know, children of immigrants and who don't have any connections to the entertainment industry, you know, animation or otherwise, the career feels rather, you know, perhaps unattainable or foreign, you know, when you don't have any connection to that world. When you started, and all of you, when you guys started, did you get a sense that, you know, it was sort of difficult to break into? And I feel like, you know, it seems like there's been a shift, you know, throughout the last few years, at least the last decade, in this sort of like speech of inclusion and diversity. But when you guys started, was that, you know, how was that being handled, and was it something that you had to face?
Yeah, I think that, you know, for me specifically, like I grew up in an area where there weren't very many Latinos at all. And I went to a school where there weren't very many Latinos at all. So for me, it just felt like when I finally thought, okay, what it would be like to come to the US and work in animation, I was just like, well, I'm gonna be a kind of outcast anyways. I always am. So it was just kind of like an acceptance thing for me, where I was like, all right, if I'm the only Latina in the room, that's not going to be any different than what my life has been like before. So I just kind of went into it because I had that experience. And it was actually a really pleasant surprise to come to Southern California and be like, whoa, there's actually way more people out here like me than there ever was when I was growing up. So for me, actually, it was kind of flipped. Like you know, as soon as I got in, I met I actually met one of my good friends, and he's like a painter on the show I'm on now. His name's Ivan, and we met at like a studio in Hollywood, and I was like, wow, another person who speaks Spanish. Like, it was kind of like really cool for me to come out here and actually see that there were some Latinos already. It wasn't like, I mean, after that initial experience, I have always, for the most part, been the only Latino woman in the room when it's a decision-making kind of scenario. And that kind of was stark moving to the US, because I just never really realized all the kind of stressors of being a Latin person here in the US. It was very different than what I experienced growing up. So I think there was a culture shock there. I had to like think about that. You know, there was like a long time where I think I felt like I had to assimilate more than I ever did in Canada to feel like I was more kind of like white passing. There was like, no, I would definitely not wear hoops to a meeting, for example. Now it's a little different, you know, like it's definitely more celebrated, and like groups like this are amazing for someone like me. Like, I came out here with a bunch of Canadian kids, and like now I just feel like, you know, Latinos are way more visible in the industry to me. I feel like I'm maybe a little bit more visible to other Latinos. So it's been kind of this like, you know, journey with it and within the animation industry as to how, you know, I started off in it, how it's been more accepting now. Even stories, like I definitely got shut down with like my, you know, my stories in the beginning, and now it's like, ooh, you're diverse. So so, you know, it's changing, and it's cool. But yeah, it definitely seemed, at times it seemed hard to reach, but I think that it shouldn't feel as hard now for people getting into it. So I'm excited for the next generation of like Latinos to come in, because it's like the doors are open for them.
Yeah, it's kind of a very exciting time right now, where where everyone now, there's like, yeah, that is true. There's like, can you tell me? I mean, like you start hearing pitches about like actually like what it is like to be this particular like Latino culture, you know, and before it used to be like, you know, people were interested in like, you know, for example, Coco, everyone was interested in like the Day of the Dead, but now you're starting to see like it branch out and be like, oh, there's more to us.
Yeah,
For example,
exactly.
yeah, when I moved to the States, I had the interesting realization that I didn't know many Puerto Rican animators, and when I got to the my art school, I knew a couple of Latinos, but I was the only Puerto Rican, and I was like, this is intense. And especially then when I got to like work at Laika, where like in Portland, I don't think there's even, I think I was the only Puerto Rican in the entire Oregon state. I don't know. That's an over exaggeration. I'm gonna
For sure.
but it was almost like daunting. And if I were to like, whenever they would ask like, hey, you want to pitch stories, I was always like, should I pitch something that is very Latino? Will they even accept it? Like, I should have done
Right.
it. I mean, now I should have been like, I should have come in, and that would have probably given me more like something more interesting and something more unique. But you know, I think at least for me, I remember like finding out that there were Puerto Rican people who worked in some TV shows that I liked, and some people who were animators who were Puerto Rican who were working other things. And so I tried to do like I went on Facebook and made my own little Facebook group where I was trying to like almost do like a spotlight of a Puerto Rican flag in a like, but for animators. I'm like, where are you Puerto Rican animators? And so like with that Facebook page, I started getting to know a lot of other people. They just happen to be scattered around the world, but it is, you know, I think it is like what Andrea was saying. Like now we're getting to the point where there's so like now there's no excuse. Now anyone should tell their stories, and I think now it's a really good time. So it's exciting.
Yvette, you know, for you, in the 2 decades that you've been at Disney, were those conversations being had back then? What was it like, you know, being you at the beginning of your career?
You know, it's exciting that it's actually now a part of every conversation. And, you know, as Andrea said, it like groups like this, like LatinX and Animation, is amazing, bringing so many, not only does it bring the community together, but it also allows different studios to actually have an access point into the community, which is so great. So it's interesting because when I think back when I first started, even like I used to have a girlfriend of mine Jessica, and we were both, you know, Latinas, and we'd hang out and go to lunch, and people are like, "Oh, are you guys sisters?" We're like, "No." Oh, cousins, right? And I was like, "No, we're friends. We're not all related." And now it's more, you know, fast forward 20 years later, it's, you know, it's really, it's exciting, the change and shift I've seen even within Disney Animation, and with the with the priority on making sure that we tell not only, you know, diverse stories, but they're told by people from diverse backgrounds, whether, you know, no matter what story we're telling, to make sure that we actually understand and we have people within the studio who are actually able to share that background.
You know, I think it's interesting for people, you know, watching that might, you know, be, you know, thinking about working in animation and might come from, you know, immigrant backgrounds, or, you know, even if they're not from immigrant backgrounds, but people that have no connections to the industry. How did you guys have that conversation with your parents? For example, you, Miguel, what was that sort of moment of trust, of not pursuing a traditional career, and following this dream of working in something, you know, quote unquote, non-traditional?
I think for me, growing up like 7 miles from Hollywood, we always had like, hey, I want to work over there. Like when my dad said, échale ganas, all my friends and family members always ended up working or moving east of us. So I always felt like going west was always something for me. I always wanted to do. And, you know, watching cartoons as a kid, my dad would sit down and he was super supportive. My mom was the same way. And just seeing cartoons and seeing how, like, I think I grew up having, I was overactive kid. So my parents saw that as like, oh, we could calm him down if he sits down. Like, I broke my arm like 3 times one year, and it was always let's sit him down. Let's have him like just watch TV and just calm down. And, you know, I started watching TV and drawing, and my dad saw that I had passion for that. And also being in like first generation Mexican American family, they always saw as like Hollywood was always like, they're going to reach for the stars. So they always pushed me for that. And just, you know, when I first started working in animation, I was one of those kids that, and I can't really turn it off now, is I walk into the room and I just try to spot the people of color. I was like, all right, who could I hang out with first? But yeah, just having just people surround. I like to surround myself with talented people. Even on Casa Grandes, one of the first things when we're helping bring up the show was I fought to get a diverse crew in there to represent the show that we're working on. And I just heard things like, oh, we can't find Latinos out there. And I was like, no, you're just not asking the right people. So the very next day, I brought in a list of like 300 names, and Andrea was on it, Guillermo was on it, I think Brian was on it, just because, you know, I asked around, like that one day I called all my friends, and, you know, like Abe Otis, he worked at Cartoon Network, and he was like, oh, I recommend this guy. And Abe Otis is half Iraqi and half Mexican. I was trying to bring him over. So I had this list, and, you know, I'm lucky that I got to hire, I think, like 60 people from that list. And just because I was sometimes at Nickelodeon, I was sometimes the only Latino board artist in like the entire studio. And I was like, oh, what's going on? Like, it's kind of hard for us to land work. And part of it's because, you know, people get hired from like their friends. Oh, I recommend this guy.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, making it foreign now, it feels like, you know, it's a good start right now, the way we are on the Casa Grandes, and especially at Nick, it's so diverse now that I can't wait for the next year, the next following years, just to walk in there and there'll be a big fiesta sometimes. Just all the cultures, everyone just hanging out, having parties, you know, just mixing everything.
I want an invitation. Nick has
Yeah.
good parties. I heard they had Pitbull one year. So
oh yeah,
Miguel, specifically about the Casagrandes, can you tell us you and Lalo Alcaraz, how did you and Lalo sort of created this show departing from the Loud House and, kind of creating a whole other universe based on a pre-existing sort of, one of the characters from a pre-existing show, and then creating this universe that's very culturally specific?
Yeah. Well, it started off as we had this little character who was kind of our Lincoln's crush on the Loud House. And the first time I saw the design, she was like a little redheaded girl. I was like, no, let's make her Latino. I just had my daughter. She was just born. And, down the line, we saw the character and she was Mexican-American. And when they asked me about working on the Casagrandes, like it was going to be a half-hour special. And that's when I got to sit down with all the writers, and myself and the writers collaborated. I shut down all their BuzzFeed articles that they brought up on being Latino. I was like, no, we're going to make it authentic. Let's, this is how it was growing up in a multi-generational family like myself. Like I had cousins, tias, like, oh, my entire block, we were like my padrinos, my madrinas, like, our enemy across the street. But it's just having all that combined, I got to, influence the show, and it's loosely based off of like, my family, how I was growing up. Obviously, we couldn't add gangs in the show, so we had the gang of gatos, like cats. So they're the ones that are menacing the whole city. And Lalo didn't help me out with anything.
I am the original Ronnie Ann. The show is based on me. It's autobiographical. Don't listen to this guy. He doesn't know what he's talking about.
It's 6 feet apart, so it's okay. But yeah, it's I'm actually a chologram. I'm not here. I called Lalo. I was a big fan of Lalo's work, and I took a Latino studies course in my high school, and my teacher brought in one of his calendars that he did, and ever since I was like, I know this guy, and he was always in the back of my mind. And when we're working on Casagrandes,
literally,
yeah, we were just developing shows, and we would hit like some roadblocks on like, we don't want to alienate the other audience, but I always felt like, I'd rather focus on the audience that wants to expand and like they want to learn of cultures, and just seeing how different we are and how similar we are, with just first generation immigrants being how we are, and how like big family, and pouring a lot of love into the show, right? And Lalo could talk a little bit more on that.
I have no idea what he's talking about. The show is all me. I did it all.
Yeah.
Was there any particular episode that you felt, I know there's the Dia de Muertos episode that's particularly special.
Okay, now I can talk. I was lucky to, work on Coco, and so I got lucky to, fortunate to write the Dia de los Muertos episode for Casagrandes. And we did a kind of a kid version of Dia de los Muertos, where it was her little friend, little sister, loses her frog, passes away, like your pets that always pass away. And so it's a whole lesson where the girls ask the abuela, how, can Dia de los Muertos help her overcome her sadness and grief, and then it all goes crazy because they misunderstand what Dia de los Muertos is. So it's a learning opportunity, but also we have fun, and we're not afraid to bend the traditions a little bit, for entertainment purposes. They're sacred to us, but you know what? We can share them, and people can make them their own too. So,
Totally.
All right, I'm out. Bye.
Andrea, in your role as the art director in the Cuphead show for Netflix, do you want to tell us a little bit about sort of you know, the freedom that you had working, you know, in this show. We know that comes from a pre-existing property. So how do you approach, you know, the work creating this world for the new show?
Well, it's a lot of research. So I think we're trying to emulate a whole era with the look of Cuphead. So I think I initially found freedom and getting to draw on paper for, the first 2 months I worked on it, because that's just not what we do anymore. So for the first 2 months, I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna draw on animation paper with my pencil, like the old fashioned way, because I really wanted to channel that, like that feel. So that was really freeing in the beginning. And I think actually sparked like a lot of like insight as to how things might be handled and like the kind of style, because it's, we're trying to emulate an era which is it's like a decade of content that they created. So I had to kind of pick and choose what we wanted to build the style of the show based off of, because you have to kind of choose bumpers so that you don't have something that looks in one episode like a Fleischer cartoon and then in another episode like Snow White. So it was, I found a lot of freedom in that, like in the research of it. I actually felt more like an animation historian in this project than I've ever like felt doing anything else. I had like all my like stacks of books and what the processes were, how the cameras moved, like what the pigments were like. I even bugged some Disney people to see if they could let me into the vault. I was not successful, but I did I did try my very best. But yeah, it was like in that, like it was a really creative process in the beginning, even though you are like, trying to emulate an era and something that's been, seen before in different forms. You still have to kind of come up with your own formula, your own recipe. I kind of call it like our own kind of Cuphead recipe. And that was really fun. And I think I still have my stamp on the show in that way. Like, I just said this in a previous like interview, and if this sounds hokey when I hear it back, oof. But I feel like a cartoon DJ, like I get to like pick the tunes and mix it up, and then I get like this, this product at the end that's kind of unique, even though you're emulating past work, it's still unique in its own way. So I think that's been a super fun, creative feat for this project that I think maybe a lot of art directors, even when they were talking to different art directors, maybe didn't see that in the project. And I saw that. I was just kind of like, yeah, I think I could still make this my own and really creative and really fun, not just for myself, but for all the people working on it. So I guess that's like the long answer, but yeah, that's how I'm trying to bring my own flavor into an era that's been of animation that's already been established.
I'm sorry this is sort of basic, but just in case anyone is not familiar with what art direction means in animation, could you give us sort of like the small pitch of like what the work of an art director in an animated project entails?
Yeah, art direction for an animated series is actually, it's not recommended. Don't do it to yourself if you're an artist. You're gonna cry every day. It's really, when I started in animation, I was a designer or doing backgrounds or paint. I would always be like, well, why can't I be an art director? Like, I don't have the experience, but let me do it. And then after doing my first show, I was like, oh, this is why they don't let people do it, because they don't have experience. This is crazy. You are managing multiple episodes at any given time at different points through the production. So you're really having to like keep, kind of like an eye on, at any given point, painters, background designers, a compositor, effects design, prop design, and they're all kind of in different spots, but you're kind of putting it together linearly in your head. So it can make you feel a little bit like a crazy person, especially for TV production. It's because of the schedules, the way they're staggered. You're not on one thing, you're not getting to think linearly from beginning to end on one thing and then start on the next thing. You're on about 13 things at any given point, 13 different storylines. So that is, you get to create the style in the beginning with very talented people, and that's really fun. But that's the first 3 to 4 months. What this show is almost like 6 months actually of development for the show. That's really the time that you get to, create and do new things and do really fun things. And then after that, you're really trusting a team of people to work with you to bring this to life. So I kind of feel like a coach sometimes. I always liken it to that, like for animation, for series production. Like I feel like I get to pick very valuable players and I get to coach them through this. And together we kind of come out with a product at the end. But that's kind of the best metaphor I think I've thought of to explain what my job is like, because it is really nebulous unless you've done it and gone through it.
Right.
Yeah, so hopefully that sheds some light for some people who are wondering.
Thank you. Yvette, I'm sorry to go back to this 2-decade thing, but I think it's interesting because in these 2 decades, what we've seen is also the transition, from 2D animation to, mostly CG productions, and has that, democratized the art form, or, does it require more people that, could get jobs now working in CG animation? How has that sort of shift from 2D to CG in the past few decades, evolve the art form and the industry of animation?
Yeah, I think, obviously, we at Disney, we did a huge shift into CG animation, but we do work to keep the 2D around. We still have 2D animators within the studio who are still doing hand-drawn, animation. And I think it's just, it has, maybe expanded the industry to people who maybe don't traditionally draw as, who didn't grow up in 2D animation, who didn't grow up studying that art form, and allowed more people to get involved in animation. But I also think that, it's interesting because sitting kind of where I was sitting for the last 2 decades, you see, one thing I have learned is that the industry is constantly evolving, right? And so you get settled in. When I first started Disney Animation, it was all, hand-drawn animation, and you're like, oh, okay, and they were just, the CG department was so small, and it was just this, little thing that they would do. And so you kind of settle in thinking, oh, this is what it's going to be like. And then, I sat there and kind of lived through the evolution of it and how it's constantly changing. And now, and I think everything is a pendulum, and it shifts, and it goes one way and it goes extreme where everyone is, oh my gosh, 2D is no longer around, and then it'll swing back. And so I think that it kind of, just accepting and knowing that everything is constantly shifting and changing allows for the constant, for growth and for it to evolve into something different. So now we're seeing 2D, like I said, Disney, we have 2D animators, people who come in and, and they still draw, and we just, when we ever have projects that require that, we get our teams together and try to make sure that, the world's, our 2D animators are part of our animation department. They're not separate. They're not this small group of 2D animators. They are part of the animation department, who actually learn how things work in CG. And then just like the CG animators, really are constantly going back to the 2D animators, talking about how things work there. So.
Just to get a little more into the nitty gritty, can you describe, your role? What is it sort of like a day-to-day for you on the production side?
Sure. So I kind of grew up in production, as I said, and as the co-producer, I partner with another producer on the show, and we work closely with the directors, and our role is to really partner with the directors to help make sure that we have the creative as we screen, because we work on features. The projects I work on are features, and so they take a few years to get done. And so making sure that we are hitting our creative milestones, and the creative is constantly evolving and growing towards what is eventually be in the theaters. And so we partner with them on that, making sure that we're constantly pushing the show forward, and we're not, hopefully not spinning, on one place. And then also partner with the many, we're fortunate to work at Disney where we have a lot of different partners with marketing and consumer products. And so as the producers on the show, we partner with those partners in making sure that what we build within our studio is actually translated and transferred to the other partners across the way. And overall, you know, we obviously partner with our associate producer and our visual effects supervisor, who are actually the ones focusing on getting the images made and getting the show done on time and on budget, hopefully.
Great. Guillermo, you've talked about a little bit how you started in storyboarding and now you're head of story in Connected at Sony. You want to tell us how that, you know, transition changed in terms of responsibility and, you know, how that, you know, being head of story, you know, has, yeah, sort of shifted your focus on the things that you're involved with in a production?
So when I started storyboarding, it was just like I was just the guy who was always trying to come up with the funniest thing, and would always try to come up with like how to break the story with like humor and stuff. And I think when I got the position of being a head of story, I realized that like I went from being like the bratty kid who's like, I want to make some silly jokes, to the guy that had to like control all other board artists who wanted to do the same thing. So I became the rebel who now is a father and now is like trying to be the mature one. But it's been a great experience to be a head of story. When I came into the position, I sort of slightly understood what it meant, but and I think it's different for any different other films. But like for me, it was exciting to be able to like, you know, sit with the director, because the whole plan was that, so I was just hired to be a board artist, and the director was like, we're going to bring a head of story. He's going to be amazing. And he mentioned who it was, and I was like, oh my God, so excited to work with this head of story. Excited. I love his humor. He's amazing. Let's do this. And then as I continued boarding, the director was like, you know, do you want to be the head of story? And I'm like, okay, sure. So like he just gave me the responsibility. He's like, here you go, which was frightening. But then as the project continued, I realized that especially Connected is one of those few films that I could say that like I could 100% be a head of story for, because the one thing about a head of story, you have to have the same understanding of tone and what the comedy and what the director wants, and almost like finish each other's sentences. And so me and the director had that like a lot. Like for example, like Connected has sort of a kind of like a dark humory sort of vibe. We're a little bit bleak when it comes to our humor. So me and him like understood each other perfectly. And I can use that as I try to explain to other board artists. Like if I bring someone new, I can tell him like this is what the tone of the movie we're gonna go for. Like it's interesting. It's like like you have other films that can be a little bit more slapstick, and we're trying to stay away from slapstick. It's a little bit more realistic in this one, and it was just it's a very once I became a head of story, I became fully obsessed with the concept of being a head of story and just the responsibility of it, just to be able to have a team and also try to create for example, I try to create an environment where everyone has a voice and everyone can say what they want, like, which was great. Thanks to Mike Rianda and Jeff Rowe, who are the directors, who are open enough to be like, hey, they're the writers of the film, but here are the pages. What do you think? Break them. If you don't think they work, let us know. So it created an open environment where everyone was just saying, I don't like this or I don't like that, and it's just really made it so that everyone had like a voice, and that sort of like liberty of having a voice transition into their scenes that they were bored, because they were like just they felt like auteurs of each scene that they were working on, and to be able to be the guy that's just like kind of like trying to like just direct them ever so slightly, to be like, no, to just go this way. I don't think we will do that in the movie. All right, push back. I think, I don't know, you might ask the board artist and they'd be like, whoa, Guillermo, what a horrible experience that was. It might, who knows? But I think it was a really good experience, and it's a fun journey to be able to be with a director and try to help someone's vision come to life.
Do you make sure
Connected?
The what?
Would you say you and the director connected?
Trust me, like that's the first time I've ever heard a connected joke. I'm just kidding. No, we've connected in so many ways. Yeah, it's wow, that sounds weird. But yes, I love the guy. You're saying, Carlos?
Yeah, I was asking if you miss sort of the, being involved in more of the actual, storyboarding.
Well, it's funny you say that.
The shift of being, yeah.
It's funny because I've noticed that like in regards to head of stories, there's like two types. There's the one that's more of a managerial where like it just directs and supervises the team. But in this particular case, I think because we were such a small crew, I ended up having to like manage, but at the same time like board in the movie a fair bit. So I ended up being almost like a lead board artist, but also head of story, which was a little bit too much to juggle, but I think we did a good job about it. But I got to. Well, it's funny because in the beginning, I think it's in the beginning of the process, I boarded a fair bit, but then once like more board artists started coming in, I would just be kind of giving like thumbnails of just the idea, just the concept of what we want for the scene, what we want the scene to say, what are the emotion of the characters, and then with those things, with that little basket of goodies, we just let the board artists do their thing.
I think that's probably true for a lot of leadership positions in animation. That like experience of you get to do stuff in the beginning and then other people come to the party kind of thing.
Yeah, and it was gratifying, and it is nice to kind of be like able to get to when those artists get to the point where like you guys see eye to eye, and you're like, no, now I understand how this is working, and then it makes the connection work, and it makes the process and being a head of story or an art director like really gratifying.
Yeah, I definitely forgot to say that. It is awesome because I said it was like really hard, and it is hard, but it is awesome to get to connect with like, it's like being in a band, like you guys get on that same kind of wavelength, and it's really cool to connect with like these high level creatives and create something really special.
Yeah, and especially, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, and it's also, as you all know, like this is such a long process. so I do what I also try to do with my team is try to like not only have employees but also have a friendship there and a second family, because it does help when you're like making something for so long and then you're like, I need people to talk to, and we're all pretty close, so yeah.
Miguel, can you tell us a little bit about what being the creative producer on the show like the Casagrandes, entails? Is it about, keeping the authenticity or sort of following the cultural beats and needs of the show? What does the role entail?
Yeah, it's kind of, I'm kind of like the host supervising producer at the same time. I'm touching everything from working on scripts, punching them up before we kick them off to the board artist, making sure the episode is doable and just trying to see where it lands. Like, we might have an episode where we're working on 1 week and then the previous episode is way too heavy for the designers. So we're kind of like shift things around, touching boards to even going over red line drawings on design, color, just having my my hands, like my hands and toes dipped in every department, which is awesome because they trust me that we have a super talented crew, and going back to, I get to work with some of the people I looked up to, and sometimes like brand new artists that are fresh into the industry that are blowing us out of the water, and just seeing everything that they bring and just mixing it all in. And when you work in animation, you kind of have to be adaptable to one style, and just making sure everyone sticks to that style. And I help out my art director Miguel Gonzalez all the time whenever Andrea gets slammed all the time on her side. Like when he gets slammed, I'll like, all right, I kind of have to learn how to draw with my left hand. I'll need two Cintiqs just to keep up with everything. but that's kind of what I do. You know, I also direct, so I'm in the room with the writers. I get to pitch my ideas to the writers and bring it all the way into the mix and finally, you know, send it over. And yeah, so it's I don't know what my job is, but I do everything.
You know, I think it's interesting. You know, we're all connecting digitally or virtually now. And you know, the film industry has stopped productions. You know, in live action productions, you know, aren't able to continue. But animation has, you know, thrived during this time of the pandemic. Do you want to give us a brief, you know, summary of how you've, you know, continued to work from home, and how has this, you know, sort of shifted, you know, the work that you work in animation right now?
I think, well, I feel really lucky to be at Netflix, to be honest, because they're a tech company. So they were like, here's your server, like within 2 weeks of being at home, which, I mean, we've shipped now, I think maybe 3-4 episodes, which is not nearly as quick as what we were doing in-house, but we've definitely been able to mobilize as, you know, as a team working from home, which I gotta say, like, I had no idea. Like, I got, you know, so much reservation from everyone when I told them I was going to be in animation and an artist, and I had no idea that I'd picked like a pandemic proof career. So now I'm like, well. So it's been actually really awesome because, you know, like, I mean, I feel so fortunate to be able to do this, which is like, you know, the creative line of work that I've always wanted to do, and B, that it's been available for me during this time, which has been so hard for so many people. And being at a studio that has really kind of supported us to make sure that we can get up and running as quickly as possible.
Yeah, the same thing with Sony. Like the day that the week that the pandemic showed up, they were like, "All right, here's your laptop and here's your server, now go." And I thought in my mind, I was like, "This is gonna be perfect." I like it, to be honest, to be able to work because it got to the point that like a lot of the board artists on our team were like starting to be from offsite. So like it just kind of like it still felt the same. I mean, it is different, especially now when you have to like, your wife is having a meeting and you're having a meeting, and so like you're having to like, well, who's gonna hold the baby? And so we're like, Brock, go first, hold the baby, and if we both lose, then we just put the baby in a box or something. I'm joking, right?
I just
but
made
like,
my husband leave with the dog. I was like, I've had enough of this.
Yeah. Like I'm having this conversation and I can see my wife in the back like
Hurry up.
Oh, good, ignore me. Continue pushing Latino animation forward. But it's yeah, I think that's the only level of difficulty is how everyone is at home now. So so you don't have that break. But other than like in regards to work, I think everything feels pretty good.
Yeah, sorry, I think I dropped off for a second, but it's the same, you know, we feel fortunate that working at Disney Animation, we were up and going, you know, it's amazing for a studio that's kind of been there and settled into the day-to-day. Within 2 weeks, everybody in the studio was up and working and running. And so I feel fortunate in the sense in that, you know, that we're able to continue working. But, you know, animation is such as everyone here knows, it's such a collaborative way of making films. I do miss the hallway talks and running into people and hearing, you know, all those quick conversations that you have in the hallway. But, you know, we've really, you know, adjusted to, you know, being able to, you know, we'll have happy hours or something. It's just so we can see people. But
yeah, it is hard.
Yeah.
Like the disconnection, and I think the days have gotten longer because it takes more time to connect. So I mean, it's not something that I'm looking forward to forever. I think if this keeps going on in animation, you know, I think meeting in the beginning, like what you're describing, like, I think to get that initial like spark between a team is very important to have people in house. But yeah, like moving forward, I don't know. It's kind of a brave new world with this whole thing. So it's interesting to hear. Anyways, to discuss.
That's what I keep saying. We're all just making this up. No one's been through this before in our industry. So all we can do is make it up. And some people, you know, everybody's dealing with it differently. Some people have kids that they're trying to school at home while they're trying to work. Some people have little ones that they're trying to that aren't ready for school, that are trying to take care of. Some people are living by themselves who love talking and interacting with people. So I think it's, you know, it's important that we just kind of continue to check in on each other and making sure that we're all okay.
I think we should 100% like do this thing where like every studio goes to a park. We are all in hamster balls and we just run around in hamster balls. And then that's how we kind of socially distance each other.
Yeah, it's like those like soccer games with the bubbles.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Just like, hey, how's it going? Boom, just like constantly like hitting balls and stuff.
I'm actually going to pitch that for my team. But yeah, that's actually a good idea.
Yeah, over on our show, it's we've been delivering episodes every week. So I think we're on day 83 of working from home now. So you know, it's everyone's good. It does take a little bit longer to get work done. I actually have to put in a full 8 hours sometimes. But no, I'm just kidding. I always work 8 hours. But yeah, it's really good just sending work over to my revisionist or the board artist, or you know, having these Zoom calls help a lot. And it's you know, it's great. Magdiela could tell you she's running things on our end now. She's on. But yeah, we've been working. It's every week we've been working, delivering episodes. And
yeah, it's kind of crazy that it's possible. I'm glad this didn't happen like 10 years ago, because that would have been like insane. But like now with the technology we have, it just happened to be a point where I think, yeah, a lot of us could get this done.
Can you imagine this happening with no phones, no laptop, no Netflix?
No way.
What a horror story.
Gross.
We'll drop off 9 sheets of
yeah.
Oh yeah.
So jumping in, I know we're a little bit over, but you know, Miguel and I had a couple Q&A questions to ask, and you know, we'll keep it quick because I know everyone has a family and their lives to get back to. So we appreciate your time. So Miguel had a really good question. Let me see if she can ask it herself and unmute.
Hey guys. So my question is how are you staying creative and inspired during this time at home? Like, what are you doing, and what are some advice you can give to our members to stay creatively motivated during this time?
I've actually had a really rough time. And I had to I'm kind of trying to fix myself currently by doing the artist's way. So I'm journaling in the morning, and I've blocked off time to sketch, and I'm doing all kinds of I don't know, weird new age stuff. But yeah, I'm trying. It's been I don't know, it's weird because you have a lot of time, but also there's definitely been sorts of blocks here and there for myself. I don't know if anyone else has experienced that.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I've hit a block a few times, but also just, you know, rediscovering books I had at home, reading them, just stuff that got me through college helps. You know, what's that? The Kill the Cat one? I can't remember the name. But just reading books and, you know, watching shows out there that are kind of binge watching things and then sitting down and just, you know, getting ideas. But I also set, I always have a sketch pad right next to my desk. Whenever I'm working on something, I'll just sit down and just sketch some stuff out. But just carrying a sketchbook with me everywhere I go, even going to a drive-through, and, you know, you're going to be sitting in the line for an hour in and out. And every time you sit down, sketch and draw something because you're going to be there not doing anything. And yeah, I think also just having friends that you know, trying to work together and draw stuff, doing these Zoom calls. I'm like, hey, what do you think of this drawing? Or what do you think of this? And that's kind of what we do. And also playing House Party helps. Too.
Oh yeah, that actually has been fun.
I've been trying to like a maniac. I've been just grabbing the toys of my daughter and making short films with it. Like just making like little, like it's almost like, I don't know. It started with me playing with like a little mini doll that she has, and I created this like really weird like Instagram stories of just like making like shorts between her and like Minnie and my daughter just talking about life and silly stuff as best friends that they are. But then like new toys started showing up, and I'm like, ooh, new cameos, new guests in the show. Which is interesting because like it was because I was so bored, but at the same time I was like, oh, there's a lot of like it's getting me like boredom for some reason. It's making me be more creative.
Oh, I'm sure that's
and making stuff that is my like, I don't have to do this for any studio or anything. This is just for me. This is because there are points where I just get like, I keep drawing and it's just like a little bit exhausting. So just to be able to grab a doll and do a little video with my daughter, and it has to look, it can look crappy because the crappier the better. I think it does keep me sane, only for a little bit, you know. As soon you guys will see like an animated movie of it, because that's my mind completely, and now I just have to.
We're like, he needs help. He's at the future level with this thing.
Yeah, I'm like, hey, what do you guys think? Is this cool? And people are like, yeah. Hey, do you want to talk? Is it okay? Can we talk
Should
about
we check in?
Yeah. And yeah, and also like, and also watching a lot of like TV. It's weird because I'm like, yeah, I have a list of shows that I haven't seen in a while, or I haven't seen. I'm gonna go watch them, and all I've been seeing is stuff that I've seen so many times, and I'm like, what about the list of things that you watch? But yeah, no, it's tough and it's crazy, but there are ways of making some creative stuff and to not go crazy. Yeah.
So I want to thank everybody for, again, this wonderful talk. And before we all say goodbye, I just want to ask, like, how our members or people that are watching this masterclass can connect with you or follow you on social media. Andrea, can you let us know what your social media is if you want to share?
Sure. Mine's at Pepper Fernandez. It's like that on Instagram and Twitter. I don't go on Twitter too much because it's like sad town. But if you want to drop me a line there, I might see it. I still go on Instagram and check those messages, or if people leave a comment or something like that. I tend to look at those, especially if people reply to my silly stories. Then I'm like, hey, I'll have a little short combo with you. So yeah, that's probably the easiest way to connect with me, is probably through Instagram and Twitter.
Cool. Guillermo, what about you?
You can follow me on Instagram. Billy Bob Martinez. A friend of mine told me, yeah, one of my friends was like, because I'm Guillermo Roberto, and my friend was like, wait, is Guillermo Roberto, that's Billy Bob, and I'm like, no, it isn't. And from that point out, like I just became Billy Bob Martinez, and that's been my thing. Yeah, I have an Instagram, Facebook. You can just follow me as Guillermo Martinez. I started Twitter again, just to like promote Connected, but like I haven't been on it just because there's so much in Twitter. I'm like, I don't know what to do. And I'm trying to update more and like do more art. And I used to have a Tumblr. It's Billy Bob, of course, Martinez.tumblr.com, but I haven't used it in a while. But if everything still stays where it is, then I would say October 23rd, Connected in theaters, if they still exist anywhere, you know. Yeah, those are my plugs. Cool.
Miguel, what about you?
You could check my. Is that backwards?
You wrote it down.
All right, here you go. I wrote it in two ways.
The other one.
The other way.
There you go. Uga Vida on Instagram.
Cool.
To follow me there, and I like to share a lot of stuff from the show and personal artwork. Give me a follow.
Awesome. Yvette, can we find you on social media or LinkedIn?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn and then also on Twitter at Yvette MF. But there's no E at the end of Yvette. My mom thought she'd be different, so now I spend my life explaining why there's no E at the end of Yvette. Thanks, Mom.
Cool. And Carlos, where can we find you? I know you we can find you on social media, but also like, are you have any upcoming pieces that you're writing as well?
I'm always writing for whoever hires me. Yeah, you could find me at Carlos_film and Instagram at Carlos Film.
Awesome. Thank you. Again, thank you, everybody. This is enlightening, and I loved hearing everybody's perspective. And thank you, Carlos, for leading the discussion. And hopefully this inspires our members creatively and professionally to pursue careers in animation and also writing as well. Magdala, I'm not sure if you want to say any last words as well.
Hi.
Hi, guys. You guys are awesome. Thank you guys so much for your time. I really, really appreciate you guys' time and all the stuff that you guys are doing. It's such an inspiration for everyone at home right now. And I know some of you personally, so I'm just so grateful.
Sorry, I did.
But anyway, just wanted to say thank you guys. Seriously, I was just listening and you guys are just, God, there's so much talent out there. I'm so excited for the future of Latinos in the industry. And I think that right now, this time, you guys continue working from home and us delivering, just like Fuga said, we're work as usual. I'm sure you guys are too. And I think that it's going to prove that animation is not just for kids and it's not just animation, cartoons. It's actually like a whole new, playing field for horror and adults and kids and stuff. So that's super exciting. We're excited to be doing some more things in the future. So if there's any project, anything that you guys are working on, keep us in mind. We'll always love to promote your work, put you out there, and also, really, really, really thankful because you guys, you have no idea how powerful and the cool emails we get of people just being like, I watched this and just seeing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 people on screen that are brown like me making cartoons, like blow mine, and that's so impactful. So thank you guys so much. So yeah.
Thank you guys for still putting this together. I imagine it wasn't easy without it being a live event. So thanks for sticking to it.
It was crazy to just go from live action to digital world, but the LALIFF team, the LFI, and people like your representatives and your people too have been really helpful to sort of organize everything and kind of move from one shift
platform
right
to
away. So yeah, I think that it's been really beneficial, especially because we can now have these recorded, and a lot of times we get our events sell out, so a lot of people always get really sad, like I wish I could go. So this is a great way because now we're reaching even more people, especially international. We have a lot of people from Mexico and France that are following.
Oh wow!
So it's super cool.
That's great.
So,
yeah.
Cool. Well, again, thank you guys, and let's get a good video of us waving and
everyone waving. Can I take a picture?
Yeah. If you want to put a sneak peek.
Okay, I'll do that. One sec.
All right. Tell us when you're ready.
All right. I'm trying to get a cool shot. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. Okay, I got it.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you guys for joining us. I hope you guys learned a lot. That was really, really awesome. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you. Thank you to our audience. Thank you for joining us for the LatinX animation audience, for the LALIFF audience as well. If you want to learn more about LatinX and animation, you can follow us on social media at LatinX and Animation or LatinX and Anim. And you can join to become a member at our website at latinxandanimation.org. And if you want to continue to support us, give us a follow, give us a shout out, interact with us. And if you want to support as well during these times, feel free to donate as well to support our programs. And shout out to the LALIFF team for making this a possibility. And, we're excited to continue these talks and these events in the future. Thank you, everybody. Bye.